Good evening and welcome to the Vampire's Den. Once again, thank you to everyone who watched and enjoyed my last video. It got a far more positive reception than I was hoping for, and I did enjoy a lot of the discussions underneath it. There were a few interesting reactions to it that I could probably write a novel on at this point, but that is for another time. I know this one may seem a little out of left field, but this video was heavily requested from both friends and a few followers of mine. My Cactus video script is written, though I now have several things to add based on a few appearances in the latest chapter. Spamton's Parallels with Rousey are something I have written as well, and that should be shorter, so I'll be working on that next. I also need to write a follow-up to Spamton's trans allegory because Chapter 5 was encouraging, to say the least. Anyway, this specific topic, the relationship between Spamton and Tenna, is one I'm quite passionate about, and have been since around last August when I first started digging into its more covert details, and more precisely, I am interested in approaching it by looking at the information that has been presented to us in Deltarune, and its supplemental material, and building up what we can generally conclude from it. You might have seen my boards, in fact, pop up in streams, videos, and generally floating around. These were passion projects meant to act as guidestones so people would be able to find references a little more easily and to present the sheer breadth of Spamton and Tenna's general connections, on top of showing why this television and email are still caught up on each other. This, however, will be a more pinpoint listing of specific evidence from the game, merchandise, and charity events that indicate Spamton and Tenna's relationship was deeper than mere business partners and romantic in nature, alongside what I believe are logical extrapolations from that specific evidence, organized into layers that are obviously convenient, not in any sense arbitrary. It's not every connection they have, or we would be here for quite a while, and this script is already longer than all of my priors. Also, I apologize if I sound a little rougher than usual. There's a lot of smoke around here because about a third of the US is on fire. Welcome to the Spamtenna lore iceberg. Each level is, of course, subjective, based purely upon the level of questioning I tend to get when bringing up each of these points, and how often I need to draw on my bookmarks to explain them. So if you know about something immediately on a lower level, but not on a higher level, that's pretty common depending on how much cut and optional content of Deltarune you look into. Some entries will have spoilers for Chapter 5. I will precede those with this sound, and an on-screen note. Let us begin. The Pipis in the closet. This is a lot of people's entry level into the ship, and on a surface viewing it seems like a mere gag. Tenna has something of Spamton's, Spamton is very excited and views this as evidence he still cares and hops out. Tenna seems to not recognize him, put a pin in that one, sprays him with foam, and carries the Pipis off while bestowing it with she/her pronouns. Thanks, Tenna. Spamton then retreats to the pocket. Giving it a little more inspection, however, we know that Pipis are emotionally significant to Spamton. He likes them a lot by the Fangamer Q&A, and the only other person he has given one to is Noelle, because she's the only one that ever read his emails. We can see Spamton do something very specific here when talking about Noelle reading his emails, and it's repeat himself and not finish his sentence. He only does this in situations where he is particularly emotional, like talking about how he lost everything in the weird route, or being fearful about going to the mansion. So, giving a Pipis rather than launching them at you seems to have emotional importance and weight. This also explains why Tenna has a ton of extras that he puts into the TV dinners, because Pipis Spamton gives naturally multiply, as we see with Noelle in her blog entry. This little oddball quirk with the dinners and eating Pipis is a trait Tenna actually seems to share with Spamton, though with Tenna he may do it to hide the extras, as in the alternate version of this scene where you don't have Spamton, Tenna is shamed for having the Pipis, in a way that seems very reminiscent of shaming someone for queer behavior. Who knew Tenna was into this stuff? So, this little expression of Spamton's emotions, his endearment, is treated as shameful to have, and Tenna will abandon her here in this version of the scene because he does not seem able to cope with it. We will of course return to the Pipis as there is a lot going on with it. Editing Cat here to add that yes, I have also seen the recent lore drop which indicates perhaps Spamton may have fled in part due to scary cat hellbeasts, since one was waiting in the basement and he seems to mimic their appearance with his glasses. I don't think this changes much about the iceberg aside from it being even more obvious Tenna didn't have any clue of the level of things Spamton was going through, and that phone call having potentially been a more direct death threat. Spamton still was evicted and wanted back in the mansion after his downfall, he still implies he was pushed in the pool, and he still implies the benefactor made him into a puppet in the sweepstakes. So if changing one's appearance was related to him, it's likely about his supposed swatch disguise and his glasses. And as we'll see in a later entry, the idea that Tenna completely did not recognize him is suspect. The Mike scene. Our other major focal point of their relationship, and another common one to pull on for initial understanding of these two, as it completely reframes Tenna's speech to himself in the backstage area where he initially just blamed Spamton for running away. This scene indicates to us that Tenna was aware that pressuring Spamton to sign a deal with him would have negative consequences, but that he thought he could help deal with whatever would happen. This presents Tenna as pushing for something that would ultimately part them, but being out of his depth as he was unaware how bad those consequences would be, and trying to justify both the pressuring and picking up the phone in that moment to himself because of his need to be relevant. Tenna's need to be big is a matter of survival, as being unneeded as a television means being thrown away, and he could not know the true scale of what Spamton was dealing with, so this scene presents it as an unfortunate, desperate situation for both of them. This also ends up reframing a lot of Tenna's behavior in Chapter 3 as being strongly born of guilt, and frames Spamton as someone who, while pressured, was still ultimately willing to sign the contract instead of just leaving, only doing so after that final phone call and after whatever bombshell was dropped on him there. As an aside, we can also note an interesting crossover with language here with Tenna with Noelle of all people in the same chapter, with Noelle stating she made Susie play the guitar. This is obviously very guilt-ridden language, and Tenna may be experiencing a similar level disconnect from reality of the situation due to his feelings. Noelle did not force Susie to play the guitar, and Tenna likely did not actually make Spamton sign the contract, more so than using pleading or desperate language. Mutually enhance each other. Toby Fox posted on Blue Sky that these two are a pair of intentionally similar characters who mutually enhance each other. You know, like Spy vs. Spy. Of course, the Spy vs. Spy here reflects their current bitterness and cartoony rivalry due to the misunderstanding they both have about their parting. Spamton thinks Tenna intentionally screwed him over to get his secrets, thus the kill your TV and criminal lines, and Tenna thinks Spamton abandoned him when he could have helped with whatever consequences signing his deal caused, thus the general vitriol and insistence that he is better. Toby is playing with the internet versus TV trope he set up once before with Mad Mew Mew and Metaton as an internet streamer versus a TV star, except here it is laid over a deeper background that explains why they're both seemingly so emotionally caught up on each other past a simple rivalry. Mutually enhance each other also indicates that they boost each other's stories and character. Spamton's engraved wedding ring. This is a sapphire wedding ring on the sweepstakes, in particular a design that was popularized by Princess Diana's engagement ring, and the text it hurts here leads you to the Damn You Tenna page, which is Spamton's personal vent about wanting revenge against Tenna. So we are associating Tenna quite overtly with the pain of parted love, and implying either they were married, were intended to be, or had a relationship on a similar level. As we can see, the television here is crossed out with a red marker, and Spamton on the thruple cutting board item says one can cross out the Mr. or Mrs. with a red correctional marker, which Spamton did, making Tenna his crossed out Mr. The Tropic of Love. That this was in an area Tenna claims to not know about was already suspect given its tropical themes, when Cyber City is associated with palm trees, dolphins, and tropical villas, likely due to a very specific aesthetic with a 90s theme which is reinforced by Cyber City's console borders. Welcome back, Vaporwave. But then it also flashes in rainbow, much like a certain email can, and of course the song that plays on it is titled South of the Border. Spamton mentions a relationship going south of the border in the Spamton sweepstakes on that thruple cutting board, and this particular board already holds that other pertinent reference to Tenna with the red correctional marker. We can also note the Tropic is where Tenna goes to be alone and have a moment of refuge. This is a safe space for him. We will keep that in mind for an entry much further down. The Z-Rank room. Spamton's old dressing room that you can only access by performing poorly on purpose, which holds the phone. It appears Tenna refuses to touch this room instead of changing it in any way, one of our many hints that Tenna holds some guilt over this situation. We can also note the manhole here is one of Spamton's preferred modes of transport by its appearance in the weird route, which indicates he was likely very settled in here. The sound that plays when you click the mirror is also a violent smash, and since Spamton ran out in a panic, it's likely Tenna is the one that did this in an emotional outburst. Most importantly, we also have our only in-game indicator of how they felt during the Big Shot era. A collaboration between two stars. Their smiles seemed so bright. This phrasing points to this period being tied to joy, but there's also something somber about it, indicating what undercut this happiness was sad, unfortunate even. Timeline. Everything in Deltarune timeline-wise really comes down to how to draw dragons being around 7 years overdue since Des has a badly traced drawing of a dragon under her bed. And of course we see people slowly stop coming to the Dreamer household after Des's disappearance and Tenna's flashback. This is important because Ram says Chris and that girl used to play pretend with all the Darkners, and this is when Queen's laptop would have been brought over. This, alongside the fact that Tenna says the mailroom should have 10 years of fan mail behind the doors, gives us a potential range of around 7 to 10 years ago for when Spamton would have been there, give or take a few depending on when he would have fled. This means it has been years, potentially even a decade, and both of them are still this caught up on each other, repeating each other's lines, being incredibly upset. Years of turmoil, years of wanting revenge on Spamton's part. In the Neo fight, Spamton echoes that idea, turn those cathode screens into cathode screams. And what happens that very same night when he's finally presented with evidence that Tenna perhaps did care? That's right. Years of desiring Tenna's demise, thrown out of the window likely not even 12 hours after stating he would kill him, at the barest chance that they could possibly reconnect. Toby Fox Plushie tweet. The Tenna plushie release was of course accompanied by pictures of the plushies in a romantic framing, holding hands and noses, Tenna's antennae being intertwined, but then we had Toby decide to post one of these images himself and ask us what it says about society that it's the fastest selling Fangamer item of all time. Nothing too crazy with this one, we just don't get direct ship acknowledgement like this from not fully in text confirmed couples from Toby very often. Plushies both have the Pipis. Aside from the plushies being sold in a bundle and having romantic couple photos, they both have the same exact item inside them. A lot of Deltarune and Undertale plushies have items related to them in their stories. These two both have the Pipis, with the same exact scribbly shared handwriting we see in the Sneo fight. So, even in merchandise, they are tied together, and this further cements the importance of the Pipis to both of them. The juice. They both remember the same ad read, though a little differently. Tenna says fresh from the juice, Spamton says turnip the juice, but we can tell in particular this is connected because they both spell shoes in the same incorrect way at the end of it, implying it is something they likely enjoyed together. Tenna also asks if anyone remembers it, and is met with silence. We know there's only one person who could share this with him, but this empty space, this lack of joining in on the ad jingle in a way emphasizes how their similarities likely complemented each other. Angelic Lounge Shorts romance sequence card drops. There was a merchandise drop that included the Spamton Angelic Lounge Shorts. These look rather distinctly Valentine's Day themed with little Cupid spam angels, but the merch drop was in October. Then a month later, the art commission for some of the cards that got sent out with Tenna plushies and other merch was of Tenna as a Cupid himself. It also had the text romance sequence. Just another way they are now linked through similar imagery and specifically through romantic concepts. Spamton battle music in the Doom board. During the Lightner's live revisit in the Doom board section, Tenna gets shaky and says he can't stop the music before we hit that note, and what plays is a section of Now's Your Chance to Be a. What plays when you fight Spamton in Chapter 2. Given how the Doom board already involves something else Tenna feels guilty over with the incident with the pipes, and attempts to reassure himself that he is still loved and needed, this is also likely related to that concept. Guilt for knowing he pressured Spamton to sign the contract, making him feel he would likely inevitably earn some form of retribution for what happened. This may be also related to why he thinks haters of TV are constantly trying to kill him in the Susie Zilla fight. A built-up paranoia that he did do something wrong, and he expects some sort of payback for it, and that gets that good here. Digital currency. When Susie gets the extra coins in the bonus zone by picking up Rousey, Tenna mentions that he told me digital currency was secure. Spamton telling him about digital currency isn't too unexpected from a spam email, but funnily that's only scratching the surface here for a connection because they both seem to struggle with the concept. Tenna implemented it as coins in a video game, which either meant he didn't understand it, or Spamton didn't explain it correctly, which is more likely than you think because Spamton attempted to make an NFT in the Spamton Sweepstakes, but rather than make something on the blockchain, a non-fungible token, he made a fungible token, made of paper. So they both share this quirk of being too outdated to get how to implement crypto, and potentially Spamton even passed on this misunderstanding to Tenna, which he took at face value. Mailroom. Tenna has the mailroom where we of course get the line "we don't need a mail guy" while he's clearly upset about it, but also we can get the projection of his own guilt if you do not go in. It's fine, you'll just never get to see it again. But, rewinding a moment, why is Tenna so upset this room is empty? He should know it is, right? He's the one that rerouted the game according to Ram, and in the original game, this is the sword room. The sword room has a sword in it, so the presumption may have been that the mailroom would spawn mail, or a mailman, which would make his upset more understandable. Spamton's Valentines. Several Valentines were sent out in 2024 to those subscribed to the newsletter in character, and 2 of Spamton's are about Tenna. One of them is about the foaming scene. This acts as a little hint to us about how Spamton feels after that one, and it's unsurprisingly not great. They're killing me. The other likely references in every Teenagers for Free Tumblr post, as Toby has referenced that blog before with Spamton in the Fangamer Q&A, with Fuck the Ketchup Kids. This one would make that first statement likely to the TV that cursed my dick. And of course we followed after with the very soap opera-esque line of "I thought we had something," before referencing kids and a set. So them having the Pipis and working together in TV world. And yet again we have tied both of them conceptually to romance with these Valentines. MTT dress and suit. This one is fairly simple. Tenna is in a similar or the same suit as Mettaton during his news broadcast in Undertale, and the Spamton-shaped mannequin is in the dress from the musical stage performance, which of course is a tragic tale of 2 star-crossed lovers kept apart by the tides of fate. This outfit crossover points at them once again being intentionally similar, and getting linked faintly to a play about romance. Undertale Trash Heap. Continuing with the Undertale connections, the trash piles in Undertale have a little television split down the center, next to a mailbox, with a gamepad, and if you click on them enough, you eventually get Trash Heap, which is how Spamton refers to Tenna. All of Tenna's quiz references. Some of Tenna's quiz references to Spamton are obvious, being better than email, Mr. Email. Others of note, though, are Mr. Generosity, as Spamton often says genericity. Mr. Little Nose as well, as we can see Tenna pointing out how small the Spamton papier-mâché head's nose is. Tenna will state he regrets including these answers in the main boards, meaning he is continuously bringing Spamton up of his own volition. Fuse item. Spamton and Tenna have a fuse item in Chapter 5 with Tenna's tie and Spamton's bow ties, the true tie, so a literal combination of both of them provides you additional armor as well as Spamton's defense bonus against the cat/puppet element pair, which is helpful of course for Pink as the secret boss. This also cements and ties them both together to the ghosts further, since you can give Tenna to Metaton. This concept of fusion will also be something to keep in mind for a later entry. Fangamer merch videos. The Fangamer merch videos with Tenna have several interesting connections between him and Spamton. In the video for the hero figures, we can see a Spamton-shaped hole in the wall, and in the video for the Tenna figure, the Spamton plushie makes an appearance with the Pipis in an egg cup. The outro monologue also has Tenna rather sadly saying he doesn't know any ad guys before saying he'll be in his trailer.
What do I look like, an ad guy? I don't even know any ad guys. Mike, I'll be in my trailer.
Of course, this is both a reference to Spamton being a former Addison and a direct crossover with Spamton's line about being in his trailer if your inventory was full in Chapter 2, indicating they both retreat to a similar place when upset. Toby has noted he writes the scripts for the spoken parts of these videos, even if he does not review all of the visuals. Would have helped him. This one is also simple but lends a further air of tragedy with the purposeful contrast. Tenna in the mic scene in Chapter 5 indicates he could have helped Spamton and that he would have. Spamton in the weird rap before he gets frozen by Noelle in his last projection speech insists that no one would have helped him, indicating there was a disconnect here that can end with Spamton never having known that Tenna would have wanted to help with the consequences. Businessman. Spamton is the only one to refer to Tenna as a businessman, and we can note that in Spamton's response in the Fangamer Q&A questions about his opinion on MLMs, he directly invokes being a business-loving businessman, and being kissed on the mouth. We can see this pop up again on the championship belt in a stream of references. We go from what are likely references to his experiences with the Swatchlings, given their rather violent dialogue, and Spamton's response if Chris tells him to go himself to the mansion, a direct reference to if you, the player, treat him violently. Then we get an implication that Tenna got his nose from Spamton. This is also an implication given to us by the vending machine Graffiti in 3 telling us Tenna is using extra noses from Spamton in the TV dinners. Kissed on the mouth once again, tucked into bed, an orange juice reference which we saw pop up prominently in 5, and then him mentioning he fell down the stairs and got up at 2 a.m. to go back to bed, which may be references to other experiences of his or further hinting. The consistent crossover here between him and Tenna now, though, is this businessman connection, and specifically, getting kissed on the mouth. Pushing Buddies is TV romance. In the files, the track Pushing Buddies is labeled TV romance. It is 19 seconds long, and 97 beats per minute, of course notable due to Spamton's favorite year. It is the only song in Chapter 3 to be in 97 beats per minute, which seems notable given that 19-second time. It plays when you're meant to push Ralsei, in the Love Dojo, as well as in the scene where you're about to reunite Lenino and Elnina before its revealed rules got involved. This 1997 connection is just another example of these two having a tie to romantic concepts, this time more covertly in the game files. Sweet Breeze. They both seem to remember driving around town to feel the sweet breeze. This crossover is now particularly notable because we got the opportunity to cure the poison imparted to Spamton's energy drinks from them being expired in Chapter 5, and the description tells us it was in collaboration with a certain car, likely the Congadero given the appearance of Spamton on the Fun Pack air freshener in a similar suit to Tenna. We can also note Tenna is likely attempting to recreate this collaboration in some sense, should you keep him in Castletown, as he has one of the Addisons dressed up in the Spamton papier-mâché head and another with a Pepsi drink. And they even call it a collab. Undertale Anniversary. In the Undertale anniversary, we of course have Spamton's appearance where the loaded disc is shoved into the TV. Then Spamton, after devouring a fry, relaying how he was locked out of the mansion and asking for money, mentions that he has suffered extreme personal damages due to a certain CRT, implying an emotional impact. He then goes, "You're disgusting," repeatedly once he realizes he's on a TV. When the Fangamer crew comes back in, there is a slime on the TV with a Spamton sticker on it. This is a follow-up from the Spamton Sweepstakes line about brushing the TV with mayonnaise and slimes. There was also Gerson's speech at the end of the stream, noting those that were split by the war between monsters and humans, and he specifies friends, business partners, and married couples. While friends and family is typical, business partner certainly stands out when talking about the tragedy of those parted by war, and in the order it almost implies that they are more than friends. Gave him everything I had. Tenna insists he gave Spamton everything he had, his life advice, and Spamton in his weird rep projection, and his main fight to try and get Chris to take his deal, echoes this. This may point to it being something Tenna said in desperation to him in order to pressure him to sign the deal, and also that Tenna likely believes he really gave everything he possibly could. Baci Perugina, Tenna's song and now for today's sponsors is titled Baci Perugina in the files. Baci Perugina are a kind of Italian chocolate known for having love notes in the wrappers. Given that Spamton was an Addison and you usually do ad reads for sponsors on top of Tenna calling him a mailman, it's notable that the song about sponsors is titled something to do with love notes. It is also notable because the other romantic song connection we had happened to be in 97 beats per minute. I'd like to know about Spamton and Tenna's past. In a fan Q&A section in a Nintendo Dream interview, Toby was asked about Tenna and Spamton's past and their level of intimacy. Toby states he's so happy they want to know before going silent, indicating it is not something he can get into at the moment. Given how Chapter 5 has a few other interesting implications with the fuse items and us getting more detail on Spamton's items, this may point to their full story being thematically relevant to the game and thus not being something that should be fully revealed just yet. Then, of course, Toby follows that with answering a question about how Tenna is tall enough to be an apron-wearing older husband, and small enough to be kept in a cage. The apron-wearing older husband bit is of interest since Spamton and Tenna were already tied conceptually to marriage through the wedding ring, and Spamton in the sweepstakes entry about the thruple cutting board also threatens that Spamton will be player 3 if one's partner doesn't cook more. The outside of Spamton's shop. Outside of Spamton's shop are, of course, several broken down cars which act as a callback to the cars he once shared with Tenna, but there are also these boxes. Initially, it seems like just a square rendition of the block symbol. However, if we look at the sweepstakes, we can note in the graphics that get shown are Spamton's face, a basketball, a green square, and a red diagonal slash yet again. This is a small indicator that Spamton may know about the prophecy, but we will get an even more concrete piece of evidence this is the case further down. Pipis chirps in the Z rank room. If you pick the Pipis up and take it to Spamton's old dressing room and wait, she eventually begins to go from chirping to clucking like she's distressed. This is our first major indicator that she is alive, more so than the Pipis we were typically familiar with. Special. Spamton quite often says special, and special is a word Tenna plays hey every on whenever it is displayed. Their shared leitmotif. The other times this leitmotif plays on its own is whenever the funometer appears. Making hey every tied explicitly to both the idea of something special as well as likely fun times. This also means from our very first introduction to Spamton, he was calling back to his time with Tenna with this leitmotif. Pipis chirps in the notes from Hey Every. The Pipis' chirps and clucks are distorted through in-game code. They are, in fact, the notes from Hey Every, the brassy ones. That's right, they have an egg that chirps in the notes from their shared leitmotif, making it very strongly indicative that this is theirs together, which is also likely why their plushies both have the Pipis. Love Wins room. There is another secret room behind a similar green screen as the bonus zone where the Spamton and Tenna scene happens. However, this screen's image looks very similar to the Spamton kissing booth gif that was in one of the newsletters and in the Spamton Love Network video. In this room, you have a red and a gold cage and a blue and a silver cage. If you pick love, then you get Love Wins in all caps rainbow. Happy belated Pride. If you pick hate, the blue cage gets shoved off screen. These cages likely represent a few things, but it's of note that they're both colors we can readily attribute to Spamton and Tenna given the rainbow crossover, it being a similar kind of door as their main scene, and their associated Metaton outfits. The next time we see the cages in these colors with a romantic implication, one has a baby and states it's gestating. Given that Spamton is the one that creates Pipis, this seems to be solidifying the Pipis baby connections. Small Mike sings to the Pipis. Continuing on the baby line of evidence, the Green Pippins states that he sang Rockabye Bibby to Tenna's cupboard, meaning Tenna at the very least definitely perceives it as a baby, and makes his employees sing to it. Funnily, Noelle's unused dialogue for the Pipis also affirms this with a "can we keep it if you try to use the Pipis," and "Chris, I wanted that if you make Chris eat it." Then, Pink also continues this trend with "it's not mine" if you try and use the Pipis in her fight. A big star and a little star. In the backstage area we can find a big star and a little star painted on the wall. Since Tenna and Spamton's collaboration was described as being between two stars, and there are also a lot of trash cans backstage, this is interesting as literally a big star and a little star. However, we can also note the drippy art style of these two, and we only have one character with an art style we have seen presented on screen. Makes sense as well, considering Spamton was trying to model himself after a paint program. Can never forget the slime. Tenna rather sadly notes that he can never forget the slime in his scene with the mics. Spamton calls himself a slime through his usual projection when you first meet him, and of course we have that slime that was left on the TV in the Undertale anniversary stream. On top of that, we got Toby's concept art for Tenna's intro recently, and a note was that Tenna was meant to be in a car while getting covered in slime and shrinking. The Pipis also spawns from this slime in the intro. Do with that information what you will, we'll come back to it. Tenna's magnets. The Tenna word art magnets you can buy have two things of note. One is that one of the phrases in the promotional pictures is "out of eggs." The other is that the only word from the game with all of its letters there is the word "big." There are several other teases Fangamer has slipped into renders and other images for even completely unrelated merchandise, but I won't get into all of them. Spamton probably tried to call Tenna. On one of Spamton's Valentines that referenced Tenna, he asks, "Why did you change your credit card numbers without telling me?" First, we can note that when Rule steals a card from Tenna, it's a debit card, not a credit card, so why credit card numbers? Well, it may be a replacement given that Spamton in his Weird Route speech speaks about screaming into the receiver until one's voice runs out, and no one will ever pick up. Considering he also confirms he muttered his lost friends' names at the bottom of a dumpster, it is feasible that screaming into the receiver also occurred and Tenna did not pick up, either simply because the phone in the Z-Rank room was unplugged, or due to phones seeming to not work properly in the Dark World now due to interference. Tenna replaced Spamton in the intro. Something many picked up on was that this mini blue Tenna in his intro was in a pose suspiciously close to the ones we see Addison's in, and fortunately we got the modeling and concept art which made this more apparent. The small blue figure is the exact same shade of blue as the Pipis. And if one erases the crown and antennae, it becomes clearer that this is likely a Spamton silhouette head in relation to how Toby draws Tenna here, and in how we have seen his image presented in-game and on the commissioned art for the official piano collection of Big Shot. Mailman's ass. Continuing the trend of referencing memes from every teenagers for free, it is likely the Spamton body pillow description having Spamton talk about his massive ass is probably another reference to this post about worshipping a mailman's ass. This may also be why Tenna keeps bringing up the topic. We can also see that Spamton mentions wanted criminals right next to you and your family in this post, and of course he calls Tenna a criminal. Tenna blocks the eyes on the Spamton head. The Spamton papier-mâché head in the Susie Zilla minigame has its eyes blacked out. If we look in the game files, however, we can see the sprite does not naturally have this, and the sprite for the sensor bar is separate. So it is likely a Tenna addition for this specifically. Given further context that indicates Tenna has reason to feel guilty, this is also likely a reflection of that. Haha anyone. After Tenna says his rendition of the Fresh from the Juice ad, he says, "Anyone remember that jingle? Haha anyone." There is only one other place Tenna does this, and it's after the Tropic of Love. Anyone think that was cool? Haha anyone. Given that Spamton does remember the ad jingle, it is likely he also did or would find the Tropic of Love cool, especially given how many other ties the Tropic of Love has between them already. Sepia Bridge. There is only one section in the city backstage board that is in a different color scheme than the usual Cyber City blue, and it's the bridge. This is interesting because the sepia color scheme is typically reserved in Undertale and Deltarune for memories, or for the prophecy. Something else that lends towards this being a memory, though, is if we compare it to the Cyber City we visited, we can see it lacks the taller skyscrapers. Then in the cut content, the car that would have been visible in an elevator you could take is in the same color scheme, so it may have been pulled from the bridge area. With the drive they both seem to remember, this might be the place they're both referring to with a drive around town. Getting into more speculative territory with this being in a memory color palette, Tenna says specifically he can never forget the slime. The Pipis in his intro pops out of slime. He was meant to be in a car initially while getting covered in slime by the concept directions. So the memory on this bridge might specifically be the Pipis being given to him, or spawned from slime, however Spamton makes those in the Dark World. That's just my current personal theory, but it could also be related to the collaboration him and Spamton had. Either way, this bridge seems to have been important enough to be permanently frozen in a similar memory color scheme as Tenna's other flashback. Invested in puppets. One of the cut quizzes would ask about what time Asgore's cowboy puppet show was, and all the answers would be that it was cancelled. Tenna would then state that he invested everything he had in puppets, everything he had, once again calling back to their now crossover dialogue. Since this dialogue is invoked so frequently by the pair of them, it is also of note that the only other time it is said by a different character is by Lancer in the first board, who says, "I will give you everything I have, and all I have is myself." Eggs. Spamton in the Fangamer Q&A states only friend like me can call the boys eggs, so only certain people seem to be allowed to call Pipis eggs by him, and of course the only two places in game where the Pipis are directly called eggs are by Spamton himself and by Tenna. So it seems Tenna in specific was given privileges to call them that. Given that they have one together, this means Tenna got to acknowledge them as something that could be a baby, which probably explains why he has his employees sing lullabies to the one in the cupboard. That sword. There is one item that indicates Spamton absolutely knows about the prophecy and how Tenna was going to be cleaved, and it's the sword in his shop. Its description is, cut anything 2 pieces criminal, 2 pieces with the number, so literally, and criminal is what he calls Tenna. It is also, of course, a blade. Lord of Screens, cleave red by blade. This lends a little more weight to that square crossed out symbol appearing both outside his shop and in the sweepstakes being a reference to the prophecy. Spamton wanted revenge against Tenna. It is feasible that he would fixate on it. Recognition. While in English it is a little unclear whether or not Tenna recognized Spamton in the Pipis scene, though his insistence on Spamton being unidentifiable is suspect, in Japanese some of the things he repeats in his monologue are essentially, "Wait, hold on," and "no way," indicating he did likely recognize Spamton here, but was not in a state to accept it. This tracks, as he also still tries to pretend Mike is still around when it's clear the real one left. But this makes that initial scene now a case of Spamton being ready and willing to reach out again, and Tenna drawing away because he wasn't ready. Likely due to the amount of guilt and reality he would have to confront in that moment, combined with all the stress he was already under. This will not be the first time I bring up Japanese words, as we know from the Legends of Localization book on Undertale that Toby is heavily involved in the process, so additional implications are most certainly intentional. I've kept it to single words or short phrases, though, for any entries here, since I do not speak Japanese and needed to keep it to things that could be easily double-checked with dictionaries and friends that do speak it. Big together. Tenna says in the Mike scene that him and Spamton could have been big together. While to Tenna, being big seems to mean being watched by many people, to Spamton, being big means becoming real. He notes this in the Fangamer Q&A thread that if he becomes big enough, he'll become a real boy. And in-game he talks to Chris about them being big together as well, so big they'll see past the dark. So when Tenna says that Spamton told him he was going to teach him how to plug in and make it big, it is highly likely that Spamton was actually talking about becoming real, and that at some point he thought they could do it together since he did cave to signing the deal. Plugging in also reflects how Spamton engages with the Neo body, which he is initially surprised that the Neo body did not make him real on its own before going, "Right, I need you," to Chris, like he thought fusing with the creation of a Lightner would be enough, but then reorients to the idea of needing someone else. With how much Spamton talks to Chris about taking the deal, and he also echoes other parts of Tenna's dialogue in doing so, this indicates his initial plan seems to have been to become real with Tenna. This is also likely why Spamton specifically says you lost it when you tried to see too far. You lost it. He lost everything by trying to move up past the dark into reality. Other hints of this having been the plan for the deal include Spamton praying to the Neo body even during his big shot days, Tenna knowing about Neo as a concept, so Spamton likely mentioned it to him even if he was not able to fully divulge what it meant before having to flee, the loaded disc getting shoved into the TV in the anniversary, and them now having a fuse item. Becoming big together, for Spamton at least, would mean becoming real together, and he seemed to have always planned to use the Neo body to achieve that end. Unwanted. Tenna has dialogue in the explanation for Susie Zilla that describes Chris and Rouse swinging Susie around like an unwanted puppet. We can see this unwanted idea echoed with the backstage controller with pink and yellow buttons that no one wanted to use, and the conch shell on the second board. Not a person seemed to want it. This conch also is surrounded by washed-up glass, and we can note Spamton's fight has the text of "smells like rotten glass." There's also the broken mirror in the Z-Rank room. It also has the text, "a pity." It was just repeating all it knew, and Spamton quite often repeats what he knows in brackets, as well as repeating what he heard from Tenna. Salesman is a rank. There is a rank for doing terribly in the battles on the boards titled Salesman if you got hit more than 20 times, but it cannot appear in-game due to an error in how it was meant to be presented. The next worst rank checks if you got hit more than 7 times or less than 20 times, when it should be more than 7 and less than 20 times. Given how fixable this is and how it was not updated, at this point it represents Spamton's presence almost acting as a haunting or underlying presence to TV World, which we will see reflected later as well. Cut graffiti. There is a slew of graffiti that was going to appear in the backstage areas of Chapter 3. Of course, yet again, we only have one character's implied art style on screen, and we can see in concept art for his house that there was even further evidence Spamton was meant to be a painter. This means Spamton would have painted Tenna on the walls at least 3 times. Yes, even the skinny line drawings are likely him, as we have the tree drawing from Cyber City that is next to the dumpster that Spamton can be in during the Weird Route, and of course, Spamton by the Q&A indicates he knows full well about the Forgotten Man. Another thing that tells us these drawings are by the same artist is the way that Tenna's nose cuts off the other side of his screen. It is markedly similar in both the drippy and thin line drawings. I'll be in the green room. In English, after Spamton is upset when your inventory is full, as we went over, he states that he will be in his trailer. In Japanese, however, he states that he will be in his dressing room, or the green room, since a green room is typically a changing room for performers. So, now on top of them both having an instance of retreating to a trailer when upset, they also both have a connection to retreating to places connected to each other for a moment of peace. Fun Pack merch video. In the original merch video for the Fun Pack, Spamton is presented on a CRT television, so we had the notion of him being inside of a television all the way back in 2021. He also says, "Shut up and fuck your screen right now," so there's that. The Fun Pack, of course, also had the air freshener, where we were first given the idea that he wore a similar suit to Tenna before Tenna was ever revealed, and the musical Pipis, which now has more meaning given their Pipis chirps and their shared leitmotif, and of course it reappeared in the egg cup in a later Fangamer Tenna figure video. Comeback special. Turning to Japanese once again, Spamton's comeback special in Japanese is a radio or television special, meaning we have quite the contrast here. If you treat Spamton violently, he calls out to Mike and states he will finally be a big shot, where if you treat him with kindness, he calls to heaven and wants to live for himself and his friends, while also thinking of a television special. This links his connection to Tenna and television to his better inclinations, to a desire to connect to heaven, to friends. It's explicitly a positive lean, despite the fact that it does not work out, especially with how he ends up being his strings if you treat him violently. Tenna's potential sweepstakes comment. This one is a little more out there as a warning, but during the Spamton sweepstakes there were viewer comments scrolling along the bottom, and one that appears during the Pipis rug reads, "I used to love Spamton too much, but after watching this I'm done, Spamton, I'm done anyway. Why do you want for dinner, everyone?" This is a reference to a memetic comment about being done watching Elmo on a video called Scary Elmo. First, watching is spelled correctly in the original comment, but changed to watching here, which is similar to feature as a misspelling. Then the comment about why do you want for dinner is interesting for a few reasons. First, because this is during the Pipis bath rug and Tenna puts Pipis in the TV dinners. And then because Toby called Tenna an apron-wear and older husband. Tenna would, unsurprisingly, be done after seeing the sweepstakes with the promotion of TV violence. Secondhand Kiss. In the Spamton sweepstakes, Spamton mentions on Queen's glass description, which contains 2 indirect kisses, that one can get the hottest secondhand kiss from any dead pharaoh. Queen doesn't have much pharaoh imagery, but a certain television sure does with his Sphinx. This continues that little trend of them being connected through the concept of kisses. Spamton's heart. Once again delving into the realm of speculation here, but Spamton's heart is covered in cracks. The other character we know whose heart is described as cracked is King, abandoned by the Lightners. This may indicate that Spamton's heart's condition is because of his desires of vengeance towards those that abandoned him, and he most certainly directs most of this at Tenna. We can also see that the conch shell not a person seem to want is cracked and is on a beach. One of the lines in Flower Man is, with his heart in the sand. So is a cracked blue object on Tenna's board already holding a connection to being unwanted with that unwanted puppet line. This probably reflects a few things, but in part may be a representation of Spamton's heart. Baci Perugina Round 2. Returning to the track title for and now for today's sponsors. While Baci Perugina were created by two star-crossed lovers to hide love notes, the packaging for these chocolates was based off Francesco Hayes' painting The Kiss, a painting with a man in red kissing a woman in a blue dress. Yet another parallel for the Spamton mannequin in the blue dress and Tenna in the red suit. Tenna's talk sound. For our very last entry, a short one, Tenna's talk sound in Chapter 3's board is actually set to the Sneo text sound, but Tenna has a code for his talk sounds that overrides it. Spamton's attempt to ascend to reality in the Neo body is in the code below Tenna's words, yet another way in which Spamton haunts the television. A simpler fact, but fascinating in relation to everything else, and how the Salesman Rank was already unused due to an error. That is all I have for now. I hope you enjoyed my much too in-depth look at these two's connections and indicators they had a romantic connection that was abruptly cut short despite one party's loftier aspirations for them both. I have an inkling that the hints at what these two had are so scattered because certain concepts they're tied to are related to the game's overarching narrative. Of course, it could just be Toby having fun with basically making a relationship an ARG since Spamton tends to be his favorite lore hint character. Either way, I'm sure whatever ending is in store for Spamton and for Tenna will be interesting. I'll be working on my next videos in tandem as my work allows, so like and subscribe if you enjoyed this one, even if I'm slow, and I will see you all another evening. Bye!